one, make sure.
It should say on the, you should get an announcement when it's
Oh, got it. Yep, just happened.
okay.
All right, you're all set.
Okay, so welcome everyone to our waste culture panel tonight. It's part of the Everyday Features Fest, which is a month-long series of events and programming and a block party this upcoming Sunday. All talking about the idea of sustainability, intersecting with art and science, specifically focused on cultural sustainability, urban sustainability, and environmental sustainability, and all the intersections in between, which I feel like all of you are perfectly suited to talk about all those things. So tonight we have with us, I guess I should start from Matt. So Matt Siegfried of Rabbit Recycling. Oh, I didn't. I'm gonna get back on it. Sorry, I was just saying earlier, we had a lot of children here today, so I am exhausted. My name is Sam. I'm one of the co-directors of Da Vinci Art Alliance in South Philly, who is the host of the Everyday Features Festival, alongside about 40 other partners. Who everyone here tonight is one of our partners or partnering institutions. So Matt Siegfried of Rabbit Recycling is the co-founder of Rabbit Recycling Inc. He grew up in Montgomery County, PA, and graduated from the University of Pittsburgh as a mechanical engineer. Matt left the engineering field in 2018 to turn the idea of rabbit recycling into the first pickup / drop-off service for hard to recycle materials on the East Coast. Then Haven DeAngelis
yeah.
of Fab Scrap is Fab Scrap's reuse coordinator and oversees sales and the reuse room at Fab Scrap's second location in Philadelphia, which opened in November of 2021. Fab Scrap is a textile recycling nonprofit dedicated to ending the fashion industry's commercial textile waste problem, diverting as much unused material as possible from being landfilled or incinerated. Haven joined the Fab Scrap team in October 2021 after working at various recycling and reuse businesses. She is passionate about keeping textiles out of landfill and creates upcycled fashions with her brand Stitch and Destroy. That's a really cool name. Then this is Michelle White of Bottle Underground. Michelle is the outreach coordinator for Bottle Underground. Bottle Underground is a circular glass processor here in South Philly that collects bottles and jars from local businesses and community members to recirculate it, upcycle it, or downcycle it locally. Michelle herself previously had her own glass studio working with recycled sheet glass and now supports Bottle Underground's transformation of the larger waste problem. Then Tim Bennet of Bennet Compost is the founder of Bennet Compost. Founded in 2009, Bennet Compost is a Philadelphia company that collects food scraps from nearly 6,000 households and businesses throughout Philadelphia for composting. These actions kept over 2 million pounds of food waste out of landfills in 2021. Bennet Compost is committed to a fair and equitable workplace and provides living wage jobs with benefits to its 17 employees. Tim lives in Mount Airy with his wife and 3 small kids. He is a proud graduate of Temple University. So thank you everyone for being here with us tonight. I wanted to start out, if you guys want to like introduce some more about your companies, because I feel like our intros were like a brief overview, but maybe I think because everyone has like very similar companies, but doing very specific targeted things within like the waste culture, waste industry. So whoever wants to jump in, I think it's fair also to point out that Bottle Underground and Fab Scrap are in the same building. So like, do you guys like interact with each other that much?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great resource to have, especially like, you know, we will, I think are working on our own jewelry line right now, and are also working like, you know, sometimes we'll need like a tablecloth for an event we're working or things like that. And so just to have you right there and to be able to just immediately have that resource of upcycled, you know, textile is really great.
And Fab Scrap employees, we bring our glass to Bottle Underground to get recycled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can explain Bottle Underground. So like Sam said, we work specifically on the glass waste issue because right now, if you put any glass into your recycling bin, it ends up in the landfill. Truly 100% in Philadelphia in 2021 that you put into your recycling bin. The glass specifically went into the landfill. So we are working on changing that. So we collect glass from the community, bottles, jars, you know, the typical glass that you would put in your bin. And we find any way to recirculate it, whether that is as simple as just cleaning a jar and getting it in the hands of the candle maker to actually like re-blowing it with our sister hot glass blowing studio, Remark Glass, where we will take an existing bottle and re-blow it into like beautiful glassware for your home. So any possible way of diverting glass from the landfill.
Can talk about Fab Scrap. So Fab Scrap works with over 650 brands to recycle and reuse their textile waste. We specifically work with pre-consumer textile waste, meaning fabric yardage, scraps, sample garments. We don't work with any post-consumer textile waste like used clothing, linens, bed sheets. And so far we've collected over 1 million pounds in March. So it's definitely an extreme problem. Fab Scrap is the first nonprofit to really be working at this large scale in conquering commercial textile waste and trying to end it. And our Philly location did open up in November of 2021. So we're pretty new to the Philly scene and we're slowly learning the brands that we want to be involved with here. One of our biggest supporters is Urban and has helped us move into our location and is helping us fund our first year here.
I feel like that might be a good place for you to jump in because you guys do the opposite, right?
Mhm.
That
We
you
do,
recycle.
yeah, and we all, especially Bach Bar, we have a close feel. We're there about once a week, dropping off glass, dropping off a lot of scrap fabric, large scale, more on the scroll size and stuff. But Rabbit Recycling handles materials that are typically hard to recycle: styrofoam, cork, batteries, light bulbs, even your textiles, the smaller pieces. And what we do is partially, one way is we encourage our customers, we teach them how to clean properly, because most recycling doesn't get into proper streams because of contamination. Basically, that's how the city single stream works. You don't know what your neighbor puts in, you can put your container out there, you can clean everything, but basically someone can walk by and contaminate. So the way our service works is we're basically a version of a composting company where we would pick up your container and we would drop off an empty container. You can fill it with all these materials that we accept. And the other way we're able to get things recycled or reused is we've got a very large artist and hobby community where we're able to schedule appointments for pickup. So any artist can come by our shop, any hobbyist, and take any materials we have. We have some of the most common things you'll ever see and some of the most uncommon things at our shop you'll ever see. So whether you're just looking to reuse materials, we have that avenue for artists. But we also found local solutions for materials that are hard to recycle. And if they're not local, we found ones that are still within the US that we're able to vet and make sure that downstream all their materials are, they're audited and what they do is what they say. And we're trying to, keep our mission to empower people to just find better ways to, be stewards of the earth. But at the same time, we're also trying to offer transparency to our customers. So if you use our service, you can ask us where anything goes and we'll tell you, we're not trying to, there's a lot behind the scenes to recycling. So we're just trying to change the business model of bulk collecting that really just doesn't work. And because of that, you're able to recycle more and more materials, plastic bags, snap wrappers, all different materials like that.
Cool. Then, Tim, do you want to jump in as the composter?
Sure. So we at Bennet Compost collect food scraps and other natural kind of materials. So we do some yard waste and leaves and things like that. And we make them into compost and also other soil products. So we make potting soils out of them. We make we do some worm composting out of them to make worm compost. So the idea is to kind of create this circular situation, one where it's easy for people to compost because we're trying to make it as simple, you know, for all the problems with the way that the city collects trash, when there's they at least people expect that it's going to be picked up reliably, like on a weekly basis. And so we're trying to make that just as simple for them as kind of having a weekly pickup, but also making sure that then rather than it not being disposed of correctly or getting kind of misappropriated, we're reusing that material to make something beneficial, to make compost, to make pine soil, that then can be used to grow more food so that people can have good food and fresh food, and then compost that. So it's part of kind of a circular vision of the material, which I think everyone here shares, and not just, you know, kind of in this linear version where you buy it, you use it, you get rid of it, right? Like creating a continual life cycle for things to be used over and over again. So we're not viewing them as waste really, but as resources for future things.
I think that's something I've been thinking about too, of like, you know, I feel like this is something that we all talk about all the time, right? Is like reducing waste and like our own individual consumption. I feel like we're all around the same age, so like that's kind of been like thrown at us since we were little kids of like, oh, if you recycle, the planet won't die, it's fine. So how did you all, like, as individuals, come to like doing a bigger action step toward that, and like literally creating companies about it, or like joining into companies that were already doing it, that you believe in the mission?
I think it starts at least just recognizing that there is a problem to solve, because then most people try to find a solution and start a business because they see a problem and they want to solve it. But I also think that most people that are in the industry of sustainability are a little bit also driven by that too. And, you know, I think especially for this panel, I could say that I think that it's really nice when you get your customers that follow up and are just so appreciative of the amount of work it takes to do this. And especially a small business as it is, I think it's already hard enough. So I just, you know, we're able to kind of just keep moving because of that. But I think a lot of us are solution-based people, and also just being sustainable kind of really just is it's a good fit to see a city like this that's looking for options, looking for ways to reuse and reduce or upcycle, and you know, we're bringing it to them, because a lot of other cities, and I've talked about this with you all the time, that there's no glass recycling in so many cities. There's opportunities there, but you know, no one's really seized them, which is interesting that everyone here has. So
Well, it's like, and I think for myself, I mean, I didn't start when I started Bennet Compost in 2009. I didn't start with this vision of like, we're going to pick up from 6,000 households all over the city, and we're going to be doing all this stuff, and we're going to keep all this. And it was more of like, I was living in a second floor apartment in South Philly, and I wanted to compost, and I wasn't sure how I could do it, right? So I started to look around, and I didn't see a solution. And so I thought, well, maybe there's something else here. And I was kind of in a space where I was looking for something new. And I honestly had no idea what would come of it. I thought probably this will go nowhere. And I believed so much in it that I put $100 in a bank account. I was like, this is all I'm going to spend trying to like get this started, right? Because like this is probably just a weird me thing, and like it's probably not going to go anywhere. But I say that because I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by the scale of the problem, and the scale of the problem is massive, right? But like any problem gets started, like, right, long journeys get started with the first step. And so sometimes it's about taking that first step and seeing where that leads, and taking that next step and seeing where that leads. And I think too often we get paralyzed by the enormity of the situation, the enormity of the problem, the enormity of how are we going to solve this and how are we going to do this, rather than thinking about like, all right, what's one thing I can do, right? What's one thing I can do? And sometimes that one thing leads to another. At least for me, I found that like that one thing leads to another, right? Like talking about and working on composting has exposed me to things about glass or you know, textiles, or all the other things, or how broken the recycling system is. I don't know whether I would have found on my own, or had I tried to think about all of those issues at one time, I would have just, that's too much, I'm just gonna like throw the towel, right? Which I think kind of like just focusing on kind of small steps that we can take in the beginning as a way to get started, and then sometimes it doesn't have to turn into like a whole career or a whole business or anything. It's about just taking the steps that make sense in our life and doing as much as we can. And you know, I think it's power if everybody has that mindset, everyone takes those actions. Because I think that will also lead to collective action to solve some of the bigger problems that require lots of people to be involved as opposed to just individuals. But they're kind of related.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think like my story would be very similar, which is one that was more out of like a necessity than anything else, where I was like, you know, I was a glass artist and studio glass is very expensive and also environmentally horrible. And so it was like, well, I see all of these window panels on the street that are just not getting used at all. Why not just cut the glass out and then use the window panels? And then, oh, okay, there's actually a place in Philadelphia that's doing this. Okay, great. Why not support them? Okay, you know, one step leading to another. But I feel like even, I'm sure you experience this a lot at Fab Scrap, a lot of it is like, what are you doing in your life that you can swap out that's actually going to make your life better and also make the earth better? Like, and that I think has been my personal experience too.
Yeah, and I also come from an art and design background, and while in school, I was always just looking for what can I make clothing out of something else, and just feeling the need that there doesn't need to be new materials produced. We already have so much already, and that reuse and upcycling is just the way to go for so much. And yeah, working with I worked with Rabbit for 6 months and just seeing. Yeah.
I wasn't gonna disclose that. Hayden said. Yeah.
And it's just the scale of the problem is huge to witness how much comes in each week. With Fab Scrap, we're getting around 6,500 pounds a week between both locations, and it's just amazing what the scale of the problem is, and that so many of us are kind of the first of their kind to be recycling and reusing in this way.
And providing just a convenient solution. I think that's what we all do. We provide, some of it's just you put your container outside. I mean, you've been able to do that too. You've been doing that forever. And then also for these companies like Urban to be able to benefit with having you so close. I mean, we have so much retail waste and material. So if we can, then companies like Resource Exchange and stuff deal with the post-consumer small scale side, you know, companies like hers are able to handle the commercial and, you know, large scale. That's probably more of an issue than, would you say it's more than
it's estimated, about like 40 times the amount, like for every garment made, there's about 40 times the amount of waste produced. So it's definitely a larger scale of pre-consumer fabric, which is so more hidden to the public than you don't really witness that, which it's very interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was something I was thinking about too when we were putting together the panel, is like, I think you mentioned it about how like the city doesn't recycle glass or like a lot of other things. So like sometimes it feels ridiculous where it's like they're I don't know if it's like the zero waste office or like just like they have like the zero waste initiative. And like when you actually go to the page, like there aren't a lot of action steps other than just putting the onus on like learn how to not use paper as much or like recycle, and then it's like, but it's still just going to a landfill. So I think it's interesting that all of your companies, even like on like a larger scale or a smaller scale, do work with pre-consumer waste too, or like post-industrial waste, or like even just like the restaurant industry and stuff. And yeah, I think that is really cool how like you kind of bridge both of those things, where it's like, it's helping the individual like do the action steps that they want to complete, but then it's also like the larger food waste that's happening at restaurants, like, and restaurants bringing that to you, or like glass. And then like, I don't know if I'm right about this, but do you also deal with like construction companies, like cleaning
We
out?
actually, we try to stay in the household material. We'll actually recommend other companies for building materials, just like we recommend other companies for compost. We kind of stay in our lane where it's smaller materials, arts and crafts, office materials. So you will get cardboard, and our rule of thumb is if one person can't carry it, we probably won't accept it. So TVs, like we take e-waste on larger scale, but when it comes to building material, there's companies mainly out on American Street, Reclaim, and up on Northeast that do a wonderful job at that. And we don't have the space for that. We
Oh, no, I was thinking of like when people are moving, like.
so
cleaning out
cleanouts
their
are
house.
like it's a word we kind of, especially when you hear that people want to bring a lot of stuff or want you to come take all their stuff, there's potential red flags, like, is it clean? Do you know what you're giving us? Like, have you like looked at our list? So we're a little cautious. What we'll tell people is, why don't we just kind of siphon a little bit of time? We're in most neighborhoods in Philly several times a week, and the suburbs. So if someone wants to give us a couple boxes, we're able to pick up that. But since we're serving several other customers on a route, we try to make that where we're able to serve them too and not overwhelm. But when we hear the word clean out, we're like, okay, it potentially could be too much. We've got a small shop. We're trying to get another place in East Kensington, but warehouse space is very hard to find. And so.
Yeah, that's something like even
Prime space.
our basement is somehow just keeps collecting. So we've been in this building since, what is it, 57? 56. So we have like, however many years that is of memories down in our basement. And it's like every 3 years we do like a giant clean out, and it's still like somehow not empty. So
Well, send us
I
pictures.
get it.
And we can take a little bit of time from it.
Yeah, if you want like 50 years of historical documents for people that we got you. So do you feel like working within this industry is giving you like a better understanding of the city's like idea around waste culture, and like, I guess like you were saying, Tim, like you didn't start out really wanting to like create a movement or anything, but do you now feel like you kind of are spearheading a movement in certain ways? And like the city is now putting the emphasis in like the same boots on the ground way?
I think that, I guess, I guess that there's roles for everyone to play, right? And I don't think that the solution is that the city should come in and do all of the recycling or all of the composting or all of the, all the collections, because I don't think I think that what we've seen is that model doesn't work. Right. And so I think that what we kind of see is what we hope is that what we'll do is that we will be part of we happen to be one of the earlier people doing it. That's great. We want to hopefully inspire other people to do composting in other ways, and to find, from our perspective, to find ways, because while we're picking up from 6,000 households and businesses, there are 500+ thousand households in Philadelphia, right? And so we are doing a little bit more than 1% of the households, and so it's still a small percentage. And the truth of the matter is, the model that we offer probably doesn't work for the other 90. It may work for some of the other 99%, but it doesn't work for the entire 99%. And I don't think there's one model that works for all of the food scrap and all the food waste that's out there. And so, I think that there is roles for us and roles for other companies like us to play, and there's roles for the cities to play in terms of helping develop additional models that either we're a part of or we're not a part of, but that work with different communities and work with different groups and work with different neighborhoods to make sure that we're trying to get the goal, as we see it, for as much food waste to be composted, right? And we see ourselves as a part of that solution and not like the end all be all. And that's not what we want to be, and that's not what we think the best solution would be, right? So I kind of think, again, like these very local, that's what I like what everyone hears, like these local models where we're building kind of local capacity and doing things, finding ways to reuse materials as locally as possible. It doesn't mean that everything is gonna be local. Matt mentioned that they have to find stuff that has to go to other countries, right? And we use, in the potting mix that we use the potting mix that we make, we use all kind of, it's materials that had a previous life. So we use coconut core, but they're not growing coconuts in Philadelphia. So that material has to get shipped in, right? So there's a balance there that you're trying to find. But again, that's focus on is whenever possible, supporting the local businesses, finding local solutions, partnering with people, and kind of doing things in a kind of a way that builds these networks and builds these strengths. For us, that's kind of important. And the city has to be a part of that, right? So like, regardless of where they may be dropping the ball or where they may not be doing things the way we want or not moving fast enough, which yes, they're doing all of those things, but then I think we then have to find a way to hold people accountable, but also like find, all right, where can we work with them? What are they doing? Where are the areas that we can work in? And I don't think it's easy, but it is certainly, I think it's important, right? And so like, that's kind of part of our vision. That's kind of a meandering, wandering river answer to your question. So I don't even know I answered it, but I'm hoping that.
No, I mean, my question was like, I kind of meandering too. Yeah.
I think one thing that he keeps bringing up is that we really aren't educated about recycling after like grade school. We're kind of, the city does these zero waste initiatives and everything, but the common person really doesn't really understand what goes in what. And if we want to solve like a trash issue where there's just so much food waste going to the landfill and everyone hates sitting behind a trash truck, why not at least promote these businesses? Us as a for-profit business, we don't rely on the city, but we would at least say like, hey, if you want to increase your recyclability through, like he said, our services aren't for everyone. Not everyone can afford to pay. We're trying to work with neighborhood associations to get people that can't to hopefully work in some partnership way, but it's not for everyone. We can't force everyone to recycle the compost to get rid of their glass and fabric, but at least if there's solutions that the city can say, hey, here's an alternative, or we do a lot of donating to addiction centers or women's centers and stuff. So, to get rid of a material or throw it in the trash because you don't know what to do with it versus finding a local solution where you could drop it off. I think that's where the city could work with us and saying, look, if you don't like where bottles are going, here's an alternate. It might not be for everyone, but here's an alternate. I think that's where we would at least like the city to do, but we don't expect, anything else beyond that, I think.
Yeah. I'm soaking it in. Yeah, and that's something, sorry.
No, I was gonna say like, and to the city's credit, like, they definitely are interested in our experience in solving some of these issues, but there's infrastructure and there's like everything moves slowly and there's a lot, there's the contracts that they already have and the things. And so, I think what we've been trying to do, like you were just saying, is building that network. And then also like, how can we grow our organization in a way that like has their support so that we can like move this in a way that's not like we're bashing you all the time way, but like realistically, this is what's going on. And also this is one way to solve it with recognizing that we're doing, 0.01% and we're doing 3 tons of glass a month, so yeah, it's tough.
Well, then we were thinking about that too, like when we were organizing the festival, we were like, okay, we're a tiny nonprofit and we're organizing a sustainability festival. So now everything we do has to be sustainable. But then everything that's sustainable is like double the price of normal stuff. And we're like, sick, this is gonna be great. So there's still stuff where like Brian and I, right before this, we were like, oh, we forgot to get recycling cans for the block party that we have on Sunday. What are we going to do now? Yeah, that's something I want to talk about too, which I think you brought up, is like the cost associated with a lot of these things too, of like like, how do we get access to people that are, because like Philly is so low income,
Yeah.
of like partnering in different ways and stuff, like, do you all see like future solutions towards that to get more people to have access to your, like, the resources you offer?
Neighborhood associations, I think the blocks know, their community the best, and if we can get data from them that say that there's people interested, because we don't have booths in every block on the ground, and we would love to get that from them. So if we're able to get, people that might not be interested because they're afraid of the barrier for the cost, we're with prices rising right now, we're really trying to not raise our prices, and if we can avoid that, we want to try to find some way to subsidize people that can't afford this. And we know that they're out there, they just probably don't necessarily speak up and reach out. So I think if the neighborhood associations and the communities can give us some of that data, we'd love to work with them and find who we could, help outreach, and maybe there's drop-off centers in their community spots. So, we're willing to find those solutions. I just think they know better than we do.
Yeah, I mean, one way Fab Scrap is trying to kind of give back to the community and raise awareness of just textile waste in general is that how we sort our waste is through a large community of volunteers. And they're sorting through this massive pile that we have of all of our unsorted textile waste from our brands. And they're sorting what can be recycled and what can be reused. But at the end of their volunteer session, they get to take home 5 pounds of fabric for free. And that's a pretty substantial amount. And it can also include fabric yardage that we price a little bit higher than our fabric scraps. We also have a retail store, which is what I run, the reuse room. And we kind of offer it at thrift store prices because the fabric we receive is considered waste. We want to make sure it's accessible. And we have a pay what you wish section of just fabric rolls that we receive a large quantity from. So people have the opportunity to take free fabric home and hopefully learn how to make their own clothes or mend or just reuse this material that would have otherwise ended up in the landfill.
So Fuji and I are going to the Sortathon tomorrow. So plug for the Sortathon tomorrow.
Or on Saturday.
Or, oh my God, I can actually plug for the Sortathon on Saturday.
Yeah, I can talk about ours where we, this is definitely something that has been pretty top of mind with us from the beginning. And so we pretty purposefully have our drop-offs completely free. And so that's like also so that we can make sure that we're serving like the South Philadelphia community where the Bach building is located and are being a service to all that community can be and like the diversity within that. So we have a collection service that is, you do have to pay for, but for kind of similar, like a volunteer type of thing, we want that to be a service that we can just offer for free. But obviously it has its own complexities because then we have to get funding to support that. So, it's like, it's all has its own things. But to your point, Matt, like I think it's a lot about that network and like, how do you leverage that? Like we have collection points throughout the city of like partners where they will collect glass throughout the week and then we pick it up from them. And so the business is taking on that cost instead of the individual. And that way it can be more convenient for the person and they don't have to pay for our service, but they're still getting to, drop it off and not have to come all the way to South Philly if they, are up in Fishtown or whatever. So like we're trying to come up with creative solutions for it to make sure it's as accessible as possible, but it's a challenge, especially when a lot of these things are what you think that your taxpayer money is going towards, like you are not used to paying for something that is typically just something that you don't even have to deal with, so it's tough.
I think one thing that I think part of it, what the solution is what everyone here is talking about, and that's right. Like there are different, like there need to be multiple models, and there need to be multiple ways, and there need to be things that work. There's not one model that works for every situation, right? So like to hear about the different kind of creative ways that everyone is doing things is that's part of I think what the solution is to think creatively and not just be like, all right, we should just do it like this one way or this other way. And I think, figuring out what those models are, and then figuring out which ones can support themselves and which ones need outside support, right? And that's where I think once you kind of have figured out those models and figured out those things, that's where then you are in a better position to have conversations with public officials or with nonprofits who are looking to fund these kind of projects, and say, here, like this, we think this could be a solution that works, but it doesn't support itself for X, Y, and Z reasons. And so this is where that kind of support might be needed for something like this. And all the material that everyone here is taking, if they are not taking it, the city is paying to collect it. They're paying to maintain their fleet of trucks and their workforce, and they're also paying to dispose of it, right? They're paying a disposal fee. So there are actual savings, and when we keep this stuff out of landfills, there is some money. So kind of thinking creatively, like, all right, what kind of trying to make the case that like this thing could pay for itself because of the savings that you might see, right? And then going out and doing it. But I think also it's important that when we're looking at these models and talking about that, we're engaged with the communities that we're talking with, and we're working to develop solutions that come from like within those, like in partnership with those communities, and we're not saying, hey, here's the solution, this solution works for you, you should do this, right? But like it's that process is time consuming. That process can be engagement. So that process is built on trust of like just being around, right, and doing things in the neighborhoods where we're operating for extended periods of time, right? So we moved into a new facility that's actually in partnership with the city in the Almy Longcrest neighborhood in November of 2020, right? And it's like, so part of what the work that we've been doing since then is to partner with groups that are in the community that are doing other stuff and not jumping right in and being like, hey, let's partner together, let's work together on composting, right? But to say, all right, we're working with them to do kind of like cleanups around the Cody Park, right? And so we're working in these other areas that might seem like we're not spending all of our time doing these things, but we're spending some time. And the more important thing is that we're spending that time consistently, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like we're showing up and we're making a big to do about something, then no one sees us. Like this kind of thing that like, even if it's just one or two people who are there, there's someone there every week doing this cleanup with this group, or there's someone who's doing this other thing, and trying to build those kind of relationships over time, that those people also have connections that they can open. And I think that's when you can kind of get some interesting kind of creative collaborations that we don't always think about. But I mean, all of these problems took, I know we all want to solve them. Like there's an urgency, and I think that urgency is good, but these problems took a long time to create. And so we're not going to save them tomorrow, right? So like, if your sustainability fast is not everything 100% like sustainable and perfect and thought out, like if it's just better than if next year is just a little bit more sustainable than the year before, and the first year is just better because you're spreading this awareness and having these conversations and bringing these people together, like that's all part of all of that is part of the work that we all need to do, and we all can kind of do in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I've been thinking about the composting a lot in this conversation. Well, okay, so I think in 2019, I created kind of like a cockroach city in my backyard. But so I used Bennet for like years, and then I was like, I'm gonna compost myself. And I got like the wrong container and wasn't really turning it over, and that shouldn't happen in South Philly. And it was fine the first year, but the second year was like, no, I shouldn't be doing this. And like around the same time that I was like, oh, I'm ruining everyone's experience in their yards on my entire block. The city had announced a community composting system that they had in 2019. I don't remember the name of it.
The community composting.
Yeah. That for anyone who doesn't know, it was I think like 25 to 28 community spaces that did composting out in Philadelphia, that like neighborhood could just bring their composting to. And I was like, oh my God, everyone's going to have a cockroach city now. Because I was just imagining people being like, great, here's a bunch of my food every day, and also all of the oils and everything from it that shouldn't be in compost. And I think like the education piece is a really good point too, of like, yeah, it's great to like provide the thing, but then also like having conversations about like why it's happening and like how to do it properly. So like, yeah, I love recycling my glass jars, thinking I'm doing something and I'm not. Or like I thought I was like, oh, I'm like washing out my glass jars before I recycle it. So now I'm really recycling. So yeah, I think that's part of it too, is like actually participating in the community, like then we can have conversations with them too, and it actually be like an organic conversation, not just like going out and being like, I'm the compost guy.
Right.
Let's talk. And then disappear for a year until you're back as the compost guy again. Yeah, so I guess like do like you all also participate in the community that way. And do you see that as a solution to go forward with the like zero waste initiative, and alongside that, like building a circular economy within Philadelphia?
A lot of it's just by the local businesses. I mean, we work with all of them. So really, when we defer and we just say, you know, who do you use? We get customers or potential customers that will call and say, I just saw my recycling get dumped in the trash. Like I'm through with it. What do you got? Like, let me know. And then if they hear the price or they start to think, well, why am I going to be paying for something that, it is because a lot of it is this education. We need to, it's Tim or us, like we have to teach our customers, you have to teach them about cleanliness. You have standards too, that there's a reason why recycling is hard, because there's standards on what we can accept, how much we can accept, and the quality and quantity. So if we're able to, we have to educate our customers before we even start collecting their stuff by saying like, this is a little different than what you're used to. And this is why, and we have people in our shop hand sorting and it's all labor intensive, but here's the result. And I think a lot of us see, you know, it's kind of shocking to tell people that, hey, you know, your stuff wasn't getting recycled because you could have been doing this, or you just didn't know what the right solution is, putting like a greasy pizza box in the, you know, and we don't blame, you know, this, it's hard for the city to educate everyone. It's hard for people to really just, you know, people have busy lives. So
Yeah.
the expectations really, you know, we're trying to maybe do outreach for people that don't know about us, but we don't want to also want to offer them solutions overall, saying we might not be for you, but here is one solution. I mean, we don't love to tell people where we take stuff if they aren't our customers, but we'll tell them if it's local stuff, if they can walk, you know, to Target and take their plastic bags and drop them off because it's a good way to do it. You know, we'll let them know, because that's somebody that at least cares, and you know, that's more important. As long as you're finding solutions, we have a lot of people that feel guilty or just they feel like they aren't doing enough. I think that's really hard for people, and I really wish that people weren't so hard on themselves. I think people should just look for solutions and do what they can, and you know, just small changes. So like that expectation of, you know, what we expect to change, someone that has no idea of these higher level recycling, the composting, the education part really is difficult for some of our small businesses, because we start getting things that are contaminated and it ends up being, you know, more of an issue than not. So
I also think like it's important to remember that the reason that you were talking about the circular economy, right? Like I think that's kind of the way we need to reframe it, because the reason that there's value in the glass is because they can reuse it to make glass again, right? Like it's not magic, right? Like it's part of what they're making into something else. And too often we're just like, oh, well, I want to do this. I want this to be able to be recycled. I want this to be able to be composted. I want this to be able to be whatever. And like, but the focus should be on what, like the fabrics that can be created from it, right? Like the glass that can be reused. And so like this idea of like a circular and reuse, which is even better. I mean, right, like composting for, you know, is not the ideal solution for like food, right? The ideal solution for food is for it to be eaten, right? First by people and then by animals, right? Like composting is down the list, right? Because it is in some ways, it's important and there's value, and it's certainly much better than putting it in a landfill. But there are also even better uses, right? So like what are the best, like thinking about what the best uses are, that's why I think it's like people who are really kind of like doing that circular work and making those like beautiful glass products out of that old stuff, or making like really cool clothes out of like old like that's like the ideal use, right? Like that is kind of like what's awesome. And then like all right, we can't reuse it, we can't do it for this thing, like what kind of going down those hierarchies, but like being just kind of thoughtful and mindful about that stuff, I think matters.
Yeah, and it is interesting, like, I think we even think about it like within glass, what that hierarchy, like you were saying,
Right.
with compost, like, what is that hierarchy where it's like, you know, downcycling where you're crushing it down and it's being pulverized to a pulp and it's, you know, being reused in a different way as like a sand solution versus like, you know, being remelted and reblown into an art piece or whatever, you know, like there's a whole different, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about all of those different types of, you know, circularity options. And it's not like, at least in our world, it's not like one is necessarily better than other, but it's like, how can we use this material the best?
Right.
And like, what is the best use for every single type of bottle? Like, what is the best use for all of these different types of things? And how can we just like do as much as we can?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and not only is Fab Scrap educating our volunteers and our customers, but we're also trying to educate our brands that we're working with. About 40% of Fab Scrap's textile waste that we receive is reusable, but about 51% is recycled, and that is downcycled into a material called shoddy. And that's because so much of what we're receiving are what we call headers, which are fabric samples on pieces of paper that are stapled or glued. And so much of even that paper waste could have been like not even diverted. But yeah, it's a pretty, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but to educate the brands that are producing this textile waste, and we give them data reports at the end of each year, and we're trying to hopefully educate them to change their industry standards, because it definitely is who's creating the most waste are the brands that we are working with, and not the individuals who are shopping with us and wanting to do sustainable practices. But yeah.
It takes energy to
Yeah.
recycle versus upcycling. I mean,
Yeah.
to that scale, if you're able to just scale down the actual scrap part of it, but the energy too, I mean, there's, like you said, the crushing, there's energy, there's machines you're plugging in, and there's solutions for things that can stay out of landfill, and it's not going through this perpetual cycle of creating, you know, existing and virgin material, mixing with plastics is a big one. But everyone used to use glass. It used to always be the bottle exchange of everything, and then they got away from it, and it's coming back. It's just, certain things become obvious out of nowhere, I guess, that, hey, like, this is the best container to reuse. But the energy involved to reuse that versus upcycling it into like a candle, a container or something. I know you deal with that, and we deal with that too. Do we take all of our number 2 and 4 plastic to a place that's going to make something like outdoor decking, versus is there an upcycle? But then there's questions about how long an upcycle stays out. And that's why our artists, I think, are really the best, because they are, basically they call themselves dumpster divers. They're going in and they're, wasn't trying to insult them. I guess they're self-proclaimed, but they're looking for the nit and gritty, all the things that they'd be so upset that you were about to throw out. So if they're able to take a small piece of fabric and make some type of installation that is, just reused, that has the potential of doing something more for the community, the people, the art itself, than just taking that fabric and hoping that it gets through the cycle and all the energy applied to shred. And there's a trade-off, but you can't always win that trade-off. You just got to find some balance between it.
Yeah, and it's sad because all these smaller fabrics pieces could be reused in some way by some artists, but we just don't have the space and capacity to store all that waste. If we saved all million pounds that we've collected, our warehouse would have to be huge. And so that's, why it's, recycling has to, happen where reuse is the best possible answer. But
Shoddy is great too, though, because it's like diverting more polyfill.
For
out of the
sure,
environment.
yeah.
So,
yes, and it does have its, as an insulation, carpet padding, it does get used, but to be like, I don't know, made into clothing and something is a little bit better.
yeah, I'm obsessed with your guys' videos of like the shoddy being made, where I'm like, but I thought that was one of the things that was really, really interesting about all of your organizations, and also you, Tim, because we have had a lot of artists that have been contacting us with the festival who want to compost their art now. Like just the connection that artists have with all of your companies, or like want to have with all of your companies, and like companies, when you look at places like Resource Exchange too, where like I really personally enjoy looking at what people are creating out of the things that they're getting from these, like your spaces and the Resource Exchange and other spaces. And I mean, it's just great. Sorry, now I'm thinking about the dumpster divers. So we have a couple of dumpster divers as members.
They come over our shop pretty often. But they're so creative. They're, I can't think of any of the stuff people come up with, and it's just, if we can offer a resource. Also, space is such an issue for a lot of us, where we're like, take this, because you're going to keep it out of landfill and come back, like tell your friends, tell the whole community. So I think we're trying to start soon workshops in our place where we'd be able to offer more on the like expert side of like textile, and invite people to come in and learn classes on a small scale. But I think, just having those resources, just knowing that places like us you can get materials from, and if artists, I never knew they would compost their art, that's even better. That's great. So I mean, we're open for any artist to come by. I think a lot of us are. They're the best to get reuse out of material.
Sorry, I'm just like, my brain is spinning now. Oh my gosh.
Well, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
If you want to go to that. Okay, so I have one question. Someone asked, are any of you guys' companies, would you be ready to serve high-rise buildings and refuse from a large community of people of a residential building that's a high-rise in the city?
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing that. We're in talks with a real estate company who has, I think, like 400 some units in the city, and so we are talking with them about having a separate glass bin with rules about like what type of glass can go in, making sure it's been cleaned and isn't broken. And then that way they can use that, and instead of like dropping, you have your trash chute, and then you also have your glass bin, and then having us collect from them. And that way, similar to what we were talking about earlier, that way the business is also offloading that cost from the individuals, or in some way incorporating it into, I don't know, their rent, but hopefully not. And that is definitely something that we're looking into. But the main challenge for us is, like you said, capacity. Like, it's just, we are in the basement of a former trade school, and already taken 3 tons of glass per month, and that's primarily just through people dropping off. And so that's kind of like what we are dealing with right now, is like, how can we scale? But definitely is something that we're looking to do in the future.
Yeah, we've actually been doing more work over the last year with, we've done some pilot programs with bigger buildings and doing some ways. Oftentimes there's conflict because you may have a mass of people in the building who want to do it, but the building owners or managers may be less interested or more concerned about potential issues. And so we've developed, we've now over the last year worked with a bunch of buildings to kind of develop programs that can kind of be scaled up, so that the individuals are getting some advantages for kind of working as a collective group, but then when they get to a certain group mass of participants, they're able to then convert to a different system that is more like a building-wide system. So it can kind of, rather than trying to say, we're gonna do all 400, all 150 units in one shot and open it up to everybody, how do we scale it out? So we're starting with, all right, let's start with there are 10 people who know they want to do this. Let's start with them. Let's get them going. And when they get, all right, then Dave talks to people, it goes 15, goes 20. Okay, now is the time, and the building management has to be involved the whole time with this, or the residents association or the condo association, depending on how the building is structured. We're kind of building ways for them to kind of like, for the building to scale up too, because so that even if there are some people interested, there may be some people who aren't, how do we kind of get it move from 0 to that in a way that works for us, which works for the residents, which works for the building management. And I think we've had some success over the last year doing that, and are kind of excited about expanding that and trying that with new buildings. And so it's more work up front to kind of, because there's, again, and this is, I think, where we see ourselves as, is that we've in some ways been able to service people who are existing model works. And so how do we find these new models? Like, we need a different model for people who live in high-rise buildings than we need people who live in South Philly row homes, right? And we need a different model for people who may live in less dense neighborhoods, like in the far northeast, than we do for people who live in super dense neighborhoods like Center City, right? So kind of figuring all those things out is, for me, it's like part of what's fun and exciting about it, right? I mean, it can also be challenging and frustrating, and it, have issues, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's also like what is interesting. It kind of makes the work enjoyable.
Yeah.
Just rapid recycling then?
Yeah, Tim said a lot of points that we learned quickly, that you do need to scale it up in a conservative approach, because how does your driver even, approach a large amount of pickups, because most of us would have a driver that comes, picks up the material. So starting out on a pilot where who actually is interested, we've had some like green committees in condominiums and some different mid-rises and high-rise reach out and said, hey, we are part of the green committee here. We want to introduce this, but then they actually go back to their tenants and whoever lives there and said, is this something that we want to introduce? And because we accept such an extensive list of material, we then do something, very similar. We'll try to scale down a bit and say, instead of this entire list of stuff, because the education of everything and the questions that go with it might not be worth it until people, grow with the business. So if they want to just try us out, I think we've noticed right away we're able to take it on. But I think once we get that question, I think then there's planning on their side that's really been beneficial for us, because then we kind of see, all right, are we talking 100% of these customers? Are we talking 5%? And is it going to be we're picking up all of them at once, or can we, stagger this somehow? So those, like you said, the opportunity is really interesting to kind of dive in these types of solutions and how we could pick up for an entire high rise. It would be great to be able to just serve everyone all at once. It's just, who really wants to do this and who's kind of being, pushed into it. And we want the people that really want to use our service, not just because they have the opportunity and they can. It's, it'd be great if that's the opportunity, but we're willing to work with these. But I think it gets pretty challenging on their side, building management, building owners. So we just want to make sure everyone's on the same page before we start introducing something that, maybe is too unwieldy to begin with.
Matt, you had brought up earlier too about like capacity, like if you have a limited amount of space, and then Michelle, you just brought that up too. Have you ever had to put like a pause on like receiving items or like saying no to things? Or like, are you like nervous about that at any point?
Yeah, we'll close off like drop-offs maybe like for a week or something like that. We have like drop-off hours that are on our website, and you just sign up in advance, and so we'll close it off for a week if we have too much glass. And I mean, it's an interim problem. We're like getting a massive crushing machine that will allow us to process the glass, and are also hopefully getting a cargo lift and other things that will improve our processes. So there's less hands involved. But yeah, we've definitely had that happen before, and don't want that to be the case in the future, and are actively also looking for space, and warehouses are hard. So we're definitely trying to solve for it. And in the meantime, like occasionally we'll just close off drop-offs for a week, and then usually the next week we end up just getting super inundated. So it's like, never totally is helpful, but sometimes can be mitigating a little bit. But for us, it's been mostly about like, how can we work within our space to improve our workflow, to make it so that's not happening.
We should have stopped at some point. Sometimes the team being like, we're fine, like, let's just keep going, because we were doing a move from one place in Spring Garden to South Philly, and to do a move and to operate is very challenging.
Yeah.
But sometimes small business fear of just being like keeping the wheel rolling. But at no point, I mean, it was the team decision to keep. There were many times where my brother and I talked about, hey, let's just like give a week. But then it's also a lot of customer coordination to let everyone know if you have subscribers, if you have on-demand folks. So sometimes it's more of a challenge to communicate with everyone that we're going to do something, then instead of just like pushing through the week and making it happen. And I wish that, it wasn't that way, but yeah, we probably should have stopped once or twice.
I have another question here. This one's directed towards Bennet Compost. Someone asks, since you cover only 1% of the composting, have you considered selling compost bins as part of your product line, or is that a plan for the future?
We haven't. It's not. Maybe it should be.
Yes, do it.
Yeah. No, it's not something that we've really considered, but it's certainly an idea, and we've certainly something to consider. So thanks for the idea.
All right. Cool. And then I've got another kind of a more open-ended question here is, since we talked about education being this like huge obstacle to getting to kind of where we need to be as a city, would you all recommend any maybe videos or YouTube channels or any sort of easily accessible and digestible education outlets to start to get people into the know? Or do your companies make anything like that that's easily accessible, or does someone need to make those?
I think with Fab Scrap, I think the best way to learn about the textile waste problem is doing a volunteer session. You get the firsthand experience of sorting through the big mound that we have and learning about what can be recycled and reused. I think it's interesting that spandex cannot be recycled. And that's something really no one knows unless you're sorting through our textile waste. So that's like an unfortunate thing, and definitely can educate you about like your own personal shopping experience, and like, should you be buying something with spandex knowing that it can not be recycled in any way. But I think we also always recommend Fashion Revolution as a great place to look on social media. They are really great at talking about also like issues regarding just garment manufacturing and overseas production and the whole issue involved with the fashion industry.
Circle PHL. Like, Circle PHL is just an overall organization that some of us are part of or work with that tries to provide solutions for residents in the city. I don't know the extent of what that on the resin side is, because I'm just interacting with them, but a good resource for just like, where can I start? I don't know anything about this, like what's out there. I would think locally that's good. I just Google everything besides that when I'm looking for other stuff. I can send a list, but I can get back to you.
Well, I mean, I think there is, I mean, I think I think that tours are important and getting your hands in like on stuff is important. But I also think that there is work that all of us and other like-minded businesses and organizations throughout the city can do to kind of pool resources to create those kind of, right? Like Matt might not have the budget to create a video or have someone on staff, and maybe we don't, and maybe other people don't, but like, are there ways to pool those resources together so that we can make stuff that is talked about? Because the people who are interested in recycling their hard to recycle materials are probably also interested in making sure that their glass is being recycled appropriately. They're probably also interested in like what's going on with their textiles. They're probably also interested in their food waste. And I think that like, too often we get caught in our own little kind of, material specific bubbles, for lack of a better word, because we have a lot of work to do and we're small businesses, and right, like, but there are opportunities, I think, to work across materials and across organizations, and that's all part of like building these networks and building these models. And I think that I'm hopeful that the world will go in a way that allows for more kind of in-person interactions in the future. What that timeline looks like, I don't think anyone's know, but like the more of that can happen, the more that we can sit down and kind of just have these kind of conversations, it can spark things afterwards, and then spark things for people who may be watching this and just say, oh, I'm going to reach out and I want to do one of these volunteer days, and then they go to the volunteer day and then maybe someone else. So I just think that there's a lot more work that we can all do kind of collaboratively to kind of better tackle these bigger issues. But as a small business and with limited resources, you get sometimes so caught up in like, how are we going to handle all of the glass that's coming in, right? Or how are we going to get this fabric out of our warehouse so that we have room to take more from their warehouse? So you can kind of you miss those kind of like bigger issues, right? Or you just don't, you push them. They're always like the third thing on your to-do list, right? Like there's always like something that gets put ahead of them, put ahead of them.
Maybe that's a note for next year's festival, make some TikToks about.
Well, that's like, that is at the core of the festival too, is like, you're kind of, last summer when we were developing, the festival, like one of the things that kept coming up is that like, so many people are caring about sustainability and like doing the work, but like kind of like removed in their own spaces because we all have limited capacity. So it's like, we're all kind of over here doing it and we're like, oh, I like what you're doing. Like sometimes we'll come hang out.
Right.
But like, it's rare to actually be in this space where we're like all talking about it at once, or like, I guess like the block party is a good example of like, we're all gonna be out there. So like anyone who walks by is just like, wow, there's all these things I care about in one space.
Right.
Like, let me learn more about them. Cause like, I'll be honest, I didn't know about rabbit recycling until Suji told me.
A lot of people don't know. We don't, we just, it's word of mouth. But a lot of our new customers, our driver takes a photo for the pickup, and you see a Bennet container.
Yeah.
So it's, it's the same folks. It's the same people that are, going to Fab Scrap, going to Bottle Underground. If we can kind of keep, these things going where we're offering these overall circular solutions, even if it's just between like us four organizations that can be like all inclusive for the things, daily household stuff. They're like-minded customers, they're like-minded people, so we're seeing them all the time.
Well, that's the thing, like, I was really excited about you guys because like I also have a fiber background. So like the omnipresent fear of the textile industry. And that's like, that that's the thing, right, is like, you can't donate clothes.
Yeah.
If they're stained, because it's like, who's going to want them, and then you're just donating to like affiliates or something, like your awful clothes, and then they're like, well, we can't do anything with them, and then it gets shipped out to, like, you don't know where, probably Haiti. And like, I really like that you guys do textile recycling.
We get customers that will like even make clothing, design clothing, and then they give us the scraps of their scraps, and then other artists will come in and use those scraps and give us then smaller pieces. Eventually, there might be some waste, but it just keeps getting smaller and smaller in that. And if at some point there was an overall solution for the textile waste on that smaller scale, because you're going to get it, but that trickle down. I mean, things just get smaller and smaller as people are using it. So yeah, it's just a no-brainer that it's there and around. So just, yeah, it's open for anyone to take it. Please take it. So much of it. Can you also do some type of composting with cotton? Is that?
I mean,
is there a misnomer? Is that
no, I mean, there's right, like anything that comes from is from a living, at some point was alive, right? Like can be composted, right? Like the question is, how do you, like, what has to happen to allow that to happen, right? Like there's differences in what you can compost in your backyard compost pile versus what we can handle, right? There's difference in what we can handle versus you know, the industrial composting facility outside the city of San Francisco can handle that's collecting all of their curbside stuff, right? And so it really gets back to like, what are the, you know, all the factors that go into, and what is your process for managing that? So there's nothing uncompostable about, you know, cotton fabric or you know, avocado pits or right, like any of these things. It's just, is the way that it's being done able to do it? The other problem oftentimes with things like fabrics and textiles is that you don't know, it's hard to figure out what this thing was made of when it's in the middle of, you know, old apples and old lettuce and you know, coffee grounds and beer grain and all these other things. It's not like there's a, you know, it's you have a kind of the ability to kind of check that.
You can't isolate it.
It's tricky, right? So then like what was it 100% like cotton? And is it in a you know, just if that's a cotton shirt and you just put that shirt as is in a compost bin, like that shirt's not going to break down in our system, right? Like in the time that it would need to break down. So there are these kind of factors. And so again, it goes into kind of being clear, I think, with people, right? And like some of the problem with our recycling system as it is that like there's confusion and there's you know, it comes from a place of we want to make it as easy as possible for everyone. So we want to take as much as we can and we want you to throw it all in the same thing, and right? Like that's not from a bad place, right? Like it's from a place of like, how do we make it, like, we want to make this easy so people will do it, because like, dude, it's not you, people aren't used to doing it, right? But like, it creates problems on the back end if you're a manufacturer, because you're not getting the level of material that you can use to even if you're just kind of downcycling it into a, it still needs, there still are some standards of where things need to be. So you know, that's all part of the challenge.
But I think that comes back to the education issue too, of like yeah, like what you were saying about spandex, like I knew that, but because I'm also a fiber person, you know, so it's like, and I think that one of the other things that has been going back and forth since we started the festival is we have vinyl banners, and I was very opposed to vinyl banners because I was like, that's more plastic, and then the people who were printing it was like, no, it's better for the environment because cotton is bad for water. Because a lot of stuff in the cotton industry is like introducing chemicals into the water stream. But then the reverse of that is that poly doesn't break down at all, and then it creates microfibers in the water stream. So like I've been thinking about that a lot, with what you brought up earlier, of like, how do you like break it down, or like what is the best way of breaking it down, and like evaluating all of those things. And that's something like yeah, it's really obvious now that you all said that out loud that you're doing that, but like as a consumer of your spaces, like, I didn't really think about if you were doing that or not. I was just like, oh, you're making cool stuff. So that's really interesting to hear too, of like, hey, the thought processing that goes into all of that and like all the steps of working into that.
Yeah, and like to your point, like it starts before it even gets to us,
Mhm.
you know, like that's the whole problem with right now is because it's single stream. And that's where it's like so challenging because it automatically contaminates everything basically. And so in order for us to even get it to the stage where we're evaluating it of, okay, this is a beer bottle, so it's best to be crushed. This is a really beautiful cobalt blue bottle, so it's best to be upcycled, you know, whatever it is, before it even can get to that point, it has to be not contaminated, it has to be not broken, it has to be certain types of glass, and there's all types of things that come even before that that are like, you know, the structural changes that have to happen to in order to really even be able to get to that point too. Yeah.
Yeah, the process for the consumer becomes very hands-on, and then the process
Yeah.
for us, I mean, all of our operations might have some machine or equipment in there, but it's hands-on. And like you said, you're at the will of what you get. But if you can kind of really focus on teaching people first, and then if they don't do a good job, just, you know, really letting them, it's hard to do, but I think also for your customers where you're expecting a lot of harder, you know, more work involved in this. I think you want to be truthful too and say, hey, like, you might not have gotten all your stuff recycled because you did this. If you don't do this, and most of them, some are just, you know, totally understand, some like someone accidentally put something in for whatever reason, the material didn't turn out well, or they didn't clean out the bottle. I do think reaching out to your customers and just letting them know, like, you know, just letting you know, this is why this didn't happen, but we want to work with you. We want to make this improved. But Haven would know, I mean, our stuff is all hands on. And at some point, you don't want to be like the cleaner or the last person that has to inspect something that is contaminated just because of the lack of us teaching our customers. So if we expect high standards, we have to teach our customers, you know, what we want out of it. And if we're not drilling it down, it's either our messaging or it's just there's an overall thought process that's not getting through to people, saying like, you know, it isn't like your single stream, or it isn't like you can just throw bones and t-shirts and everything in it. Like, we have a process where our system allows us to take this stuff, and you really need to understand what that business takes, because you're not washing every bottle and you don't have dishwashers to do that, and it's not part of your system. So if you can eliminate that in the beginning, you know, that makes your job so much easier. And that's where we see that too. We aren't dumping customers' bins with other bins. We are sorting it individually. So if a customer does make a mistake and has something contaminated, your bin or another bucket or someone else's isn't part of that batch. So that, I think, also helps when everything's so small and like small scale sometimes, although we're scaling up, the small scale stuff allows for more attention to customers. We're not throwing everything in this giant pile and then going at it. We are saying, this was your container, we're treating it like it's yours. So I think it's more personal. I think a lot of us deal with that personal stuff, and if someone drops off bottles that are really gross right in front of you, like it might not fly because it's a personal exchange. So that's where we like, it's nice to have that connection with customers that care, but we should also be okay with telling them, here's our expectations, because it is higher level and it is hard to do.
I think it's like, we're so removed from trash, you know, that it's like we are used to just throwing it into a can or whatever. I think that's part of it, is like building the personal connections with like the people who work in places is really important. And even like we did a virtual tour last weekend with Billy DeFalla from Rare up at the recycling center in Tacony. And while he was giving the tour, there was a dump truck that came in and just like put out some of the waste. And then he was like giving us a tour of the facility and how they sort like this one dump truck into all of these separate spaces, and it's still a conveyor belt line.
Yeah.
So it's just like I think like, even in my group, I was like surprised by that, where I was like, oh, I didn't realize we were still at that point.
Pretty low tech.
Yeah.
Like, there's some testing you can do on the plastics and maybe some materials, but yeah, it's visually and, you know, physically inspecting. And then it goes further on to the batches where things will actually get like melted down or extruded or however the process is gonna be. But yeah, it's low tech for
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
But I think like you all are like kind of going towards a solution that like includes artists in some way, and like, and mentioning Billy, like that's literally what he's doing. Oh yeah, recycled artist in residency is what rare means. So like, I think that also is like having individuals literally interacting with the trash, like not just as like a removal service, but as like I'm creating something out of it, or like finding a byproduct out of this, I think is really, I guess, I mean, yeah, really important, but like maybe that is like the bridge to something like greater, or like getting like going back to what you were saying, Tim, of like building genuine connections with people in neighborhoods. Like maybe that is also part of that, right? Like if you have an artist that's like composting with Bennet, and then teaching workshops of those like compostable art, and then being like, oh, and you can partner with Bennet or like other services. It creates like a larger conversation around that, I think.
Yeah, I think absolutely, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's all like, we think about it just going away, but it's not like magic, like it goes somewhere, right? Like it's all, it depends just how big your sense of scale is. It's gotta go somewhere. It just doesn't disappear. It's all these things that we're not able to reuse, like, or recycle or do something with. Something has to happen to them, like every single thing, everything. This doesn't like poof.
Great, are there any more questions?
Just one more comment from someone in residence at said high-rise building is that you all should probably be hearing from them soon. And they're very inspired as they just learned that management switched to incinerating a lot of their trash from the 530 units in the building, and so they're a very active member in their local community in that building, and so hopefully we'll get a whole new way to be busy soon.
But I think that is like a good point and a credit that, like, I mean, a lot of our organizations have been successful because of people like that, like of just individuals taking that one small step that really does make a difference. And like, you know, I think to me, that's the most inspiring part of my job, is like how people change their lives, you know, whether that is by contacting their building managers or by like buying the glass yogurt jar instead of the Yoplait. And then I know exactly who the local, you know, like skincare product maker that then can use that yogurt jar and things like that are just like, there, you can see how people will change their habits and start to change the way that they think, and you know, even into just the way that they're purchasing, to go to that, like back to that whole circularity idea of like, how do we bring this all back in and change the way that we're consuming, and that's, I think, like what's most inspiring of all of it is the way that people are changing their own lives.
Suji has a question.
My question is in contradiction to the acknowledgement that you're all moving in baby steps towards this ginormous problem. But I'm really curious to hear what your like pie in the sky like goals are for your organizations or your field, like that you might daydream about or just hope to see within the lives of this field.
I know Fab Scraps is to have kind of a facility in every city. And maybe hopefully one day be in other countries. We get a lot of emails from like California residents, Chicago residents asking where they can recycle their textile waste, and there just isn't anything. And that is our mission, to just end that commercial textile waste problem. We also get people from like Great Britain asking if they can ship their fabric scraps to us, and We just aren't at that capacity to do so, but that's our dream for sure.
Yeah, I think we see Rabbit as a way where we could be in communities where it's sort of self-sustaining, where the people that are doing the sorting are the people in the community. So, if we're able to take Rabbit in a few more years and kind of be able to say, like, this has worked, can we just take this and even replicate it in, even if it was like a Westchester, or just to see how, because there's so many operational things that we, as much as we want to say we want to expand, we're very small business, and I wouldn't say that like we're close to being in a new city soon, but the pie in the sky is any community could self-sustain and run a company and basically operate this. The whole community is involved where they're giving the recycling, the materials are sorted, and some of the materials are worth money, some as a commodity, and some of them aren't. They're going to have to pay to get properly recycled. But the idea, because it's really not out there in other areas, it has to work well here first. And it's going to take a couple more years until I feel like that would be it. But I don't see why this couldn't be something where even small neighborhoods like a West Philly, a Kensington, a South Philly could just have their own hubs in a way. We get lots of people that we don't operate in Jersey, but we allow people to come drop off materials. So if we were able to open connections to people that aren't able to recycle with us through the community, and they can self-sustain, pay for their own work through generating revenue in that would be great. But that would be the big goal, to kind of have it move that direction.
Yeah, similar story around, like, I think we want to make sure that we do Philadelphia well, and like how can we move slowly and smartly and scale in a way that we are still able to like really serve all of our local partners, and also take in as much glass as possible, and then in an ideal world would then be able to pilot it in other cities as well. So that would be, that's kind of a very similar story, but similarly receive all kinds of requests from all around the country. And I think the most recent one was Chile. So we definitely want to grow, but also want to be smart with how we do it. And so start with Philly and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a theme that everyone else already mentioned is this idea there's interest in this, the work that's being done locally, but nationally and internationally. And I think, we're talking like truly like pie in the sky, big stuff. Like, I think our goal was to be part of a composting infrastructure that in Philadelphia was locally based, and composting locally and returning the soil locally, and have Philadelphia be part of a network of similar locally based, locally run, locally operated and materials that are returning soil to local areas in conjunction. So not as Bennet Compost as this kind of big behemoth, but Bennet Compost is one part of this kind of mosaic of like-minded and similar oriented organizations, but that are all kind of focused on what works for what their community does and what their city needs, and encompassing what's different in Philadelphia versus Atlanta or London, right? Like all of these places doing it, but the goal of making composting accessible and simple and easy for people, and kind of learning from everyone and doing things in that kind of manner, and making sure that all the food that can't be fed to people and can't be fed to animals then is used to make some kind of other good renewable resource that can help to build up soil and sustain our ability to feed ourselves and live as human beings.
Thank you.
Also, I think just overall, the customers that we already serve, I think it's important that, several years from now, that it's just, they're still there. It's not this, we get new customers and we're grateful for that. And there are occasionally customers that move on if they move or whatever be the reason, but just knowing that it's really nice when we've had customers that have been with us from the beginning, and for whatever reason, if they have to take a pause or if they have to stop, that's totally fine. But it would be so cool if even, 5 years from now, which we would never leave Philly, we would only expand if the pie in the sky came true. I think we want to just say, are we still serving and supporting the customers that, grown with us? Because if that's the case, then, you don't need, for us, we might not need to be in another city. We might need to just get this right, because there's just so much of it. I mean, it's always nice to like hope to be in another city. On my side, the size of my business, I'm thinking we just want to like do it right here and make everyone, when we mess up on a customer, I feel like so bad, because it's like we're a small business, but they stay with us. And that's the part where like, okay, like why leave? Like why go anywhere else? This is the people that get us. So we just feel like if we can stay true to that like customer base, it would grow naturally.
I just also, Sammy mentioned earlier that you used our service for a while, then you composted yourself, and it worked well for a while. And for me, that's also a success story, right? Like the fact that like you're continued, like however you compost, like is great. Whether you do it with us, whether you do it with another organization, whether you do it with your community garden, whether you do it in your backyard, whether you got worms in your basement, whatever you're doing, if you're involved and you're doing it, like that's we see that as a win. And we see that as, when someone says, I'm going to stop using your service because I'm composting, I want to compost myself, like that is like we feel empowered by that, because that means that they've taken the step of like really kind of being even closer to being hands-on and doing it themselves. And that's, I think we need all of that, right? Like we need people to help with the bigger stuff, but we need as many people who can have the ability to, if someone can reuse some of their own fabric first for their own use, like that's for their own whatever, that's great. Or someone can find if someone can, we have tons of, my house, like glass jars that we buy, the jelly comes in it, right? And then we use it to put spices in, right? Like, so like, but that's not all of our glass that comes into our house, right? But like that's part of it. Like the more that like, whatever we can do on whatever level, I think is important. And it just changing the mindset of like, that it's disposable, right? Like that there's actually value in materials. How do we get that value?
Well, that's the thing, like, I feel like we've been talking a lot about like the need for education, but I also think that like education is empowerment, right? So like I was wrong to compost myself. But at the time I was like, oh, I'm gonna be really good at this, and I'm gonna like build like all raised beds in my backyard with like dirt I grew myself. Yeah. And like I grew cockroaches, it's fine. But like yeah, I think like it is like all of your services are empowering people to make decisions for themselves and to like not, I guess, have the empowerment of being able to go out into the world and tell people about like your services, but also the needs for your services. So like we touched on earlier, like a couple of times that like Philly doesn't offer these services, which is why a lot of your businesses exist in the way that they do, or like just the world in general doesn't offer services. So yeah, I think like knowing that is really important, and like now I know about class and I'm going to be smarter and take it to you guys. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Does anyone else have any questions?
I don't have a question, but thank you guys for doing all that you do. I worked in like environmental services for years, and nothing could hold a candle to what you guys are doing. Like you guys are making real differences, which is really cool. So thank you.
All right, we're all good in the chat. We're all caught up, and so I think we're ready to call it a night.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah. Wrap this up. Thanks for everyone in the chat. And
Hopefully, we'll see you on Sunday.
Yeah, we never know how to like end the Zoom call.
I know.
I go